Rin had never thought his quiet life would change on an ordinary supply run. He worked on a cargo ship that carried food, water, and tools from one star system to another. The job was simple. Load the crates. Check the numbers. Make sure everything reached the right station. He liked the work. It was calm and no one expected anything from him. The most exciting thing in his daily routine was watching the stars slide past the window. But that day, the supply route included a stop at the world of the Verith Empire. And that was the moment his life started to turn towards something bigger than he ever imagined. The Verith were not just another alien race. In every corner of the galaxy, their empire was known for its power, its history, and its strange traditions. They were tall, with smooth skin that glowed faintly under light. Their eyes were bright like small suns. Their language was smooth and sharp at the same time. They were famous for how proud they were. No outsider had ever been treated as equal. When Rin's ship received the permission to land at their royal palace station, even the captain had raised his eyebrows. Regular supply ships never went there. It was an honor and also a danger. When the ship entered the orbit of the Verith capital world, Rin pressed his forehead to the small window. The planet looked like a glowing jewel in the darkness. It had rings around it like soft white threads. Giant towers rose from the ground, shining like crystal spires. Energy lines pulsed across the land. He had seen many planets, but none like this one. The captain's voice echoed through the hallway and told everyone to prepare for landing and follow strict rules. No sudden moves. No wandering. No speaking unless spoken to. The Verith took their customs very seriously. When the ramp of the cargo ship touched the shining landing platform, Rin and 5 other workers stepped out. They wore plain gray suits and carried their identification bands. The air outside was cool and light. A group of Verith guards stood waiting. Their armor looked smooth like glass, but Rin could feel the strength inside it. Each guard held a long staff that pulsed with blue light. Their faces were calm, but their eyes were sharp like blades. They led the crew toward a scanning gate. Rin felt a shiver on his skin as the energy line passed over him. One guard nodded and signaled them forward. The crew began unloading crates. Everything was going well, but then a loud bell echoed through the air. The sound was deep and long. All the Verith around the platform suddenly stood still. Even the guards straightened their backs. A tall woman with silver hair and golden eyes appeared at the top of the palace steps. She wore a long white robe with shining threads. Every Verith around lowered their heads. The crew did not know who she was, but Rin guessed by the way others reacted. She was the queen. Beside her walked another figure, a young woman with soft green hair and a gentle glow in her eyes. She wore a robe that was more delicate, decorated with blue and silver patterns. That was the Princess. Rin did not understand what was happening. He whispered to the man next to him, but the guard gave him a sharp look that made him stay silent. A high voice echoed through the air. It was the announcer, translating for the humans through a small ear device they wore. The voice explained that a royal ceremony was taking place at the palace. It was the moment when the princess would choose her partner for the great trial. No outsider had ever been part of it. The crew stood quietly and watched as the nobles of the Verith began to gather around the grand square in front of the palace. Hundreds of glowing eyes focused on the steps. The princess walked down slowly. The air itself felt heavy. Every Verith noble held their breath, waiting to see who she would choose. Among them stood young warriors with proud faces and shining armor. Each one of them expected to be chosen. This was their honor. This was their path to glory. The announcer's voice whispered in Rin's ear that the trial determined who was worthy to stand beside the princess in the eyes of the gods and the people. Rin had no idea why he felt nervous. He was not part of this world. He was just a worker. But as the princess reached the center of the stairs, her bright eyes scanned the crowd. One by one, she looked at the nobles, the guards, and the workers. Then her eyes stopped. They stopped on Rin. For a second, Rin thought she was looking at someone behind him. He even turned his head slightly, but there was no one else. Her gaze was fixed on him. She lifted her hand, palm open. The announcer's voice trembled as it translated her words. She had chosen him. A human worker. A man from Earth. Not a Varith noble. Not a trained warrior. Him. The entire square filled with a wave of gasps. Every noble turned toward Rin with faces full of shock. The guards tightened their grip on their weapons. The captain of the cargo ship stared at Rin with wide eyes. The queen stood at the top of the stairs, calm and unreadable, but there was a small flicker in her golden eyes. The announcer repeated the words again and again, making sure there was no mistake. The princess had made her choice. According to their law, once the royal choice was spoken, it could not be taken back. Rin felt his legs freeze. His mouth was dry. He was a simple man who loaded crates, not a hero from some old tale. Two guards walked toward him with slow steps. They did not point their weapons, but their presence made the air feel like stone pressing against his chest. They stopped in front of him and bowed their heads slightly. That meant he had to follow. The captain tried to step forward, but another guard raised his hand, stopping him. The law was clear. Rin belonged to the ceremony now. The guards led him up the wide, shining stairs. Hundreds of Varith eyes followed him. He could hear whispers, not in words he understood. But the tone was clear. Confusion, doubt, disbelief. When he reached the top, the princess was standing just a few steps away. Up close, her presence was strange. Her skin seemed to glow like soft light. Her eyes were warm but firm. She looked at him not as someone weak, but as someone she had already decided was important. He wanted to ask why, but he knew it was not the time. The queen moved forward. She was taller than the princess and wore a robe with golden threads that looked alive. She stopped in front of Rin. The guards knelt. The announcer whispered that this was the moment where the chosen one was presented to the throne. Rin lowered his head slightly. He did not know if he was doing it right, but the queen did not look displeased. Her eyes scanned him from head to toe. Not with cruelty, but with deep thought. Her voice was clear and calm as the announcer translated. She said that the princess had chosen a human, a simple worker, a being from a young world. She asked if Rin understood the weight of the choice. If he accepted, he would face the great trial. It was dangerous. It was not a game. The trial had taken lives before. The queen said he could refuse. No shame would come to him for refusing. But if he accepted, he would carry the name of his world on his shoulders. Rin looked around. The crowd of nobles glared at him. They did not believe he could do anything. To them, he was weak. To them, the princess had made a foolish choice. But when he turned to look at the princess, he saw something in her eyes. It was not pity. It was trust. A calm, silent trust. It was as if she knew something he did not. It reminded him of the stories he heard when he was young. Stories of explorers who faced the unknown with no promise of safety. Stories of ordinary people who became more than they were. His heart beat hard in his chest. He took a slow breath. He did not know why, but something inside him refused to step back. He raised his head and said yes. A wave of noise moved through the crowd. Some nobles shouted in their language. Some shook their heads. The queen lifted her hand, and silence returned. Her golden eyes locked on Rin. For a brief second, the calm mask on her face changed. A small spark of interest appeared. She nodded slowly and declared that the trial would begin at dawn. The princess smiled softly for the first time. The guards escorted Rin inside the palace. The halls were wide and glowing. The walls looked like they were made of living crystal. Light moved through them like water. The air smelled clean and cool. Every servant and guard that saw him gave him the same look, a mix of confusion and disbelief. A human inside the royal halls was not something they saw every day. They led him to a guest chamber that was larger than any room he had ever seen. The floor was soft under his boots. The walls hummed with a low sound, like the heartbeat of the palace itself. Eon sat on the bed and pressed his hands together. Only a few hours ago, he had been a simple worker. Now he was part of a royal ceremony that could change how two worlds saw each other. He felt fear. He felt doubt. But under that, something else was growing. A quiet fire, a feeling that maybe, just maybe, he could prove them wrong. Outside the window, the twin moons of the Vareth world rose slowly. Their light painted the palace in silver and blue. The princess stood on the balcony far above, looking down at the guest wing. The queen remained in the throne hall, silent and thoughtful. In the distance, the nobles whispered plans, bets, and questions. No one knew how this human would survive the trial. Many believed he would not. The first light of dawn slowly touched the shining towers of the Vareth palace. The air was cool and clear, and the city outside the palace walls was waking up. From his chamber, Rin looked out through the tall crystal window. He had not slept well. His mind had carried the same thought through the night. He was no warrior. He was not strong like the Vareth nobles. He had no training. Yet in a few hours, he would have to face the great trial. The princess had chosen him, and every alien in the palace was waiting to see him fall. The door opened with a soft sound. A guard in smooth silver armor stepped inside. The guard had a calm face, but his eyes held a hard expression. He told Rin to follow. Rin stood up and took a deep breath. His heart was beating fast, but he kept walking. The hallway outside was long and glowing with soft blue light. Every guard and servant who saw him stopped what they were doing. Some stared with open surprise. Others whispered to each other. Rin kept his eyes forward. The guard led him through several turns until they reached a round room with a high ceiling. In the center of the room stood a glowing platform. Around it, several royal nobles and advisors waited. At the far end sat the queen, tall and calm as always. Beside her stood the princess. She wore a pale blue robe with silver lines and a small crystal band around her head. Her green hair glimmered in the soft light. When Rin entered, her eyes met his for a second. They were calm and warm. That simple look gave him a strange strength. The announcer stepped forward and spoke through the ear device. He said this was the pre-trial examination. It was a moment when the chosen person would be shown what awaited them. It was also a moment for the queen to speak directly to the chosen one. Rin stood straight. His hands were shaking a little, but he kept his face still. The queen rose from her seat and walked down the steps slowly. Every step she took seemed to carry weight. The room fell silent. Her golden eyes focused on Rin. She was not angry. She was not friendly either. She was measuring him. When she stopped in front of him, she raised her hand and touched the crystal platform. A tall image rose from it. It showed a great arena carved deep into a red mountain. The ground was rough and sharp. A huge stone creature moved slowly across the image. Its body was made of living rock. It had glowing red lines running through its chest. The announcer explained that this was the trial arena. The trial was a test of heart, mind, and body. The chosen one had to face the guardian of stone. It was a creature older than the empire itself. Only the worthy could pass. Many Vareth warriors had fallen trying to defeat it. If Rin wanted to earn the right to stand beside the princess, he would have to face this creature alone. The queen's voice was soft but strong as the announcer translated. She said that Rin had two choices. He could step away from the trial, and the choice of the princess would be set aside. No harm would come to him. He could return to his ship and continue his life. No one would speak against him. Or he could accept the path fully. If he accepted, there would be no turning back. Rin's breath felt heavy in his chest. He knew what everyone expected him to do. He could see it in their faces. They believed he would give up. They believed the princess had made a strange and foolish choice. But Rin looked at the image of the creature again. It was massive and terrifying, but something inside him refused to turn away. He thought of how the princess had chosen him when no one else believed he mattered. He thought of the way the queen had looked at him. Testing him without words, he raised his head and said he accepted. The nobles whispered loudly. Some shook their heads. Some laughed quietly, thinking he did not understand what was coming. The queen did not laugh. She only watched him carefully. Then she nodded and turned back to her throne. The announcer declared that the trial would begin at midday. The guards led Rin to a different part of the palace. It was a training hall with high glass walls. Sunlight poured through. Inside, A few Varith warriors were practicing their movements with staffs and blades. When Rin entered, they stopped and stared at him. One of them, a tall warrior with red eyes and dark blue armor, walked forward. His voice was sharp as the announcer translated. He said no human had ever entered the trial. He said Rin would break in minutes. Rin did not answer. The warrior looked at him with a mix of anger and disbelief. Then he turned away with a snort. A different figure approached. It was an older Varith, with white hair tied behind his head. His robe was plain but neat. His eyes were calm and thoughtful. The announcer said he was the keeper of the trial, a guide who prepared chosen ones for what awaited them. The keeper looked at Rin for a long moment. Then he told Rin to stand in the center of the floor. The keeper picked up a simple training staff and handed it to Rin. It was lighter than it looked. The keeper asked Rin to show how he moved. Rin had never trained like the Varith, but he had worked hard all his life. He had carried heavy crates, climbed narrow ladders, and fixed broken machines. His body was not weak. He held the staff and moved the way he had learned in basic self-defense back on Earth. The keeper watched closely. The keeper did not smile, but his eyes narrowed with interest. He gave Rin a few quick instructions. Rin followed, clumsy at first, but sharper with each try. The other warriors watched. Some whispered to each other. The red-eyed warrior crossed his arms, still sure that Rin would fail. Hours passed. Rin's arms began to ache. His shoulders felt heavy. The keeper was strict but fair. He did not treat Rin like a helpless outsider. He treated him like a person who had to learn fast. When the training ended, Rin was breathing hard, sweat covering his face. But his movements were smoother than when he had started. The keeper stepped forward and spoke through the announcer. He said that the trial was not only about strength, it was about finding the right moment. The creature in the arena was strong but slow. It had a crystal core on its chest. If Rin could strike that point, the trial would end. Many warriors had failed because they tried to overpower the creature. It could not be overpowered. It had to be outsmarted. Rin listened carefully. Every word sank into his mind like a map being drawn. He did not have their strength, but he could move faster. He had lived his whole life finding small ways to fix big problems. Maybe this was not so different. When he left the training hall, the sun was higher in the sky. The announcer told him to return to his chamber and prepare. As he walked down the long hallway, he noticed several nobles watching him from the balconies. Their faces were full of doubt. One of them whispered something to another and laughed. Rin felt the weight of their judgment, but it did not crush him. It pushed him to walk taller. When he reached his chamber, he found a plain suit of protective armor laid out on the bed. It was not as fancy as what the Varith warriors wore. It was made to fit a human body. It was clear that someone had prepared it overnight. Maybe the princess had arranged it. He put on the armor piece by piece. It felt strange but light enough to move freely. He looked at his reflection in the crystal mirror. A worker had turned into something else. He did not know what yet, but the path was already open before him. A soft knock came from the door. When he opened it, the princess stood there. She was alone, without guards. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then she gave a small nod. She told him, through the announcer device, that she trusted her choice. She said she had seen something in him when she looked at him on the landing platform. Something quiet and strong. She said the trial was not only a test for him, it was a message to her people. Rin listened carefully. He did not fully understand why she trusted him, but her words gave him strength. She placed a small crystal pendant in his hand. It was warm to the touch. She said it was a token of trust. She told him to survive. Then she turned and walked away. When she disappeared down the hallway, Rin closed his hand around the crystal. He felt its warmth spread through his chest. It was not magic. It was trust. And trust was sometimes stronger than any weapon. Soon the palace bells began to ring. The announcer's voice came through the ear device, calling him to the arena. This was the moment every noble had been waiting for. This was the moment they expected the human to fall. Rin walked down the long stairways. Guards surrounded him, not to hold him, but to lead the way. When he stepped outside, the air was filled with sound. Hundreds of Vareth nobles had gathered around the great arena. Their robes shone under the sun. Their glowing eyes followed him with cold curiosity. At the top of the stands, the queen sat tall and still. The princess stood beside her, her hands resting on the railing. The entrance to the arena was a wide stone arch. As Rin stepped through it, the ground changed from smooth palace floor to hard red rock. The air smelled like iron and heat. In the center of the arena, the Guardian of Stone waited. It moved slowly, its body creaking like grinding rock. Its red lines pulsed with a heartbeat of their own. Rin felt the weight of 1,000 eyes on him. He could hear whispers all around. The announcer's voice echoed above. It declared that the trial had begun. Rin tightened his grip on the training spear he had been given. He looked at the creature. His heart was racing, but he kept breathing slow. The keeper's voice echoed in his memory. Strength would not win. Speed and timing would. The ground shook under Rin's feet as the Guardian of Stone took its first step. The creature was massive. Its body was made of thick, rough stone, and glowing red lines ran through it like rivers of fire. Its eyes burned like 2 small suns. Each movement was slow but heavy, and the air seemed to vibrate with its power. All around the arena, Vareth nobles leaned forward in their seats, waiting to see how long the human would last. No one thought he would survive. Ian gripped the spear in his hands. It was a simple weapon with a long handle and a glowing tip. His heart was beating fast, but his mind was clear. He remembered the keeper's words. The Guardian could not be beaten by brute force. It had to be outsmarted. He had no armor like the Vareth warriors, no energy blades, no special powers. All he had was his speed, his focus, and his will to stand. The Guardian raised its giant arm and swung it down toward him. The impact cracked the ground where Rin had been standing a second before. He had jumped to the side just in time. Dust and red rock exploded into the air. The sound was so loud that his ears rang. The nobles whispered among themselves. Many expected him to freeze or run, but Rin did not run. He moved fast, circling the creature like a small bird around a mountain. He studied the way the creature moved. Every step was strong but slow. Its body was huge, which made it powerful but not quick. He looked at the glowing lines on its chest. At the center was the crystal core. That was the weak point. If he struck it, the trial would end. But reaching it was not easy. The Guardian's arms were like walls. One wrong step, and it would crush him. The creature turned toward him. The ground trembled again. Rin breathed slowly and waited. The next attack came from the left. The Guardian slammed its hand down again, but Rin was already moving. He ran forward, slid under its arm, and reached the back of its leg. He struck with the spear, but the stone was too thick. Sparks flew from the tip, but no damage was done. He jumped back before the creature could turn and crush him. The crowd murmured louder. Some nobles smirked. They believed he was only delaying the inevitable. But on the royal balcony, the princess leaned forward. Her eyes followed his every move. The queen sat still, her face calm and unreadable. The Guardian lifted both arms and slammed them down. The shockwave rolled through the arena, knocking Rin off balance. He fell to one knee, and his hands scraped the rough ground. The spear almost slipped from his grip. The creature moved forward. Its shadow fell over him like a storm. But Rin forced himself to stand. He could not stop now. He had come too far. He ran toward a cluster of broken stones near the wall. If he stayed in the open, he would be crushed. The Guardian followed him slowly, each step like thunder. Dust filled the air. The heat from the red lines on the creature's chest burned against his face. He climbed onto one of the broken stones and waited for the next attack. The Guardian swung its arm again, trying to smash the stone he was on. Rin leapt off at the last second, rolling across the ground. The massive hand crashed into the rock, shattering it into pieces. The creature's arm was stuck for a brief moment in the broken stone. Rin did not waste time. He ran up the side of the fallen stone, jumped, and landed on the creature's shoulder. The crowd gasped. No human had ever climbed onto the Guardian before. The stone under his feet was hot and rough. The creature roared. a deep grinding sound that shook his bones. It tried to shake him off. Rin crawled forward, gripping the cracks in its surface. The crystal core glowed just ahead of him, shining like a red star. He raised the spear, but before he could strike, the creature swung its other arm across its chest. He jumped back just in time. The blow missed him, but threw him off balance. He slipped down the creature's back and landed hard on the ground. Pain shot through his side, but he pushed himself up. The guardian roared again. The crowd was loud now, some cheering for the creature, some shouting in surprise. The nobles could not believe the human was still standing. The princess gripped the railing tightly. The queen tilted her head slightly, her golden eyes watching without blinking. Rin wiped the dust from his face. His hands were shaking, but his mind was sharper than ever. He understood the creature better now. It was strong, but its movements were predictable. If he could draw it into another mistake, he could reach the core again. The guardian lifted its foot to stomp on him. He jumped aside and rolled across the ground. The foot slammed into the floor, leaving a deep hole. Rin ran toward another stone pillar and climbed it quickly. The guardian turned to follow. As it swung its arm toward him, he leapt off the pillar and landed on its arm. The creature tried to shake him again, but this time he moved faster. Running along its arm like a rope bridge, he reached the creature's chest. The crystal core was glowing brighter now. The heat burned against his face, but he ignored it. He raised the spear again, aiming for the center. The guardian roared and tried to smash him with its other hand. He ducked low, felt the wind of the strike rush over his head, pushed the spear forward with all his strength. The tip of the spear struck the core, but the blow was not deep enough. A crack spread across the glowing crystal. Light flashed through the arena. The creature screamed with a sound like grinding mountains. It swung its arms wildly, knocking Rin away. He hit the ground hard. The world spun for a moment. His back ached. His vision blurred. But through the ringing in his ears, he heard the nobles shouting louder than before. The guardian was hurt. For the first time in centuries, the guardian of stone had taken real damage from a single strike. The crack in its core burned like a red wound. It moved faster now, not slower. It was angry. It smashed the ground again and again. Rin had to roll away from each strike. Dust and heat filled the air, covering the arena like a storm. Rin forced himself to his feet. His legs were heavy, but he could still move. He looked up at the balcony. The princess was standing now. Her hands were clenched. The queen's calm face had changed slightly. Her eyes were focused. She had seen what he had done. The creature came again. Rin dodged left, then right. Each strike shook the arena. He waited for the right moment. He needed it to trap itself again. He remembered the first broken stone that had given him the chance to climb. He needed something like that again. The guardian swung its arm at him, but this time Rin ran toward the wall. At the last second, he jumped aside. The creature's arm crashed into the wall, breaking a huge piece of it. The stone fell down, and the creature's arm was stuck in the gap for a heartbeat. Rin saw his chance. He climbed the fallen stone like a ladder. The guardian tried to pull its arm free, but he was already moving. He ran across its shoulder again, ignoring the pain in his legs. The crack in the crystal core was glowing. He raised the spear with both hands. The world felt quiet in that moment. The shouting crowd disappeared from his mind. The fear disappeared. All that remained was the glowing core in front of him. The guardian pulled its arm free and turned its head. It swung again. Rin jumped toward the chest and drove the spear straight into the cracked core with every bit of strength left in him. A bright red light exploded from the impact. The guardian screamed again, louder than before. The crystal split completely. Light poured out like fire. The ground shook, the walls trembled, and then everything went silent. The guardian froze. Its glowing lines went dark. Its arms dropped to its sides. Then, like a mountain falling apart, the stone creature broke into 1,000 pieces. Dust rose high into the sky. The arena floor was covered with glowing red fragments. At the center stood Rin, breathing hard, covered in dust and sweat. He was still holding the broken spear. His body ached all over, but he was standing. For a moment, no one made a sound. Every noble stared at him with wide eyes. They had expected to watch him fall. Instead, they had watched him win. Then a single shout broke the silence. One of the younger nobles stood up and cheered. Another followed. Soon the entire arena was filled with noise. It was not anger. It was something else. It was respect. The announcer's voice echoed through the air. It declared that the human had passed the great trial. The princess took a step forward and raised her hand high. Her face was bright with pride. She looked down at Rin, as if she had always known this would happen. The queen slowly stood up from her throne. Her golden eyes were fixed on him. The calm mask on her face was gone. In its place was real surprise. The queen, who had seen warriors fall for years, was looking at a human with respect. The nobles could not believe what they had witnessed. A worker from a distant world had defeated the guardian of stone. The air was filled with voices. Some shouted in joy. Some whispered in disbelief. Some stood silent, trying to understand how it had happened. Rin looked around the arena. He had never stood in front of a crowd like this before. His chest rose and fell with each breath. He could hardly believe it himself. But when his eyes met the princess's eyes, he understood why he had fought. She had trusted him when no one else did. He had not wanted to fail that trust. The queen raised her hand. The arena fell silent again. Her voice echoed through the air. She declared that the human Rin had completed the trial with honor. She declared that his courage had matched the strength of their greatest warriors. She declared that no one would question the choice of the princess now. The arena was wide and round, built with red stone that looked ancient. Long crystal towers surrounded the outer ring, glowing softly in the air. The sky above the arena was clear and bright. Thousands of Verith citizens filled the seats around the trial ground. They came to see the great trial, but most of them came because they did not believe a human could survive it. The voices in the crowd echoed like the wind. Some whispered in doubt. Some laughed. Some stared at the single human who stood at the center of the field. Rin kept his eyes fixed on the gate where the stone beast would appear. He could feel his heart beating like a drum. He was nervous, but his mind was sharp. He remembered everything he had seen in the last round. The walls were marked with deep scratches from the beast's claws. The ground had cracks from its steps. It was strong, but it was not invincible. The royal box stood at the highest part of the arena. The queen sat there in her grand chair. Her face was calm and serious. The princess stood beside her with hands held tight. She believed in Rin. She had believed in him since the first moment she saw something special in his eyes. The nobles behind them whispered that the human would not last even a short time. They said the trial was made to test warriors of the Verith race. But the queen had allowed this match. She wanted to see with her own eyes if the human had real strength, or if the princess had made a foolish choice. The gate opened slowly. A sound like thunder rolled across the ground. The stone beast walked out from the dark tunnel. Its body was massive. Its arms were like thick trees. Its eyes burned with bright yellow light. Every step shook the floor. The crowd fell silent. This was the creature that even trained warriors feared. Rin stood straight and firm. He knew if he showed fear, the beast would grow more aggressive. He slowly bent his knees, ready to move. He had no armor like the Verith fighters. He had only his light uniform and a spear he had been given, but he had speed, and he had a clear plan in his head. The beast let out a roar that made the ground vibrate. Dust lifted around them. It charged forward with a speed that surprised everyone. Rin jumped to the side just in time. The beast hit the stone floor and cracked it. The crowd gasped. They thought the human would freeze, but he did not. He rolled on the ground and got back on his feet fast. He watched how the beast moved. Its steps were heavy. It attacked with strength but not much control. If he could make it lose balance, he could reach the glowing core on its chest. That was the weak point he had seen during his study in the previous rounds. The beast turned around. It swung its heavy arm at Rin. He ducked low and moved backward. The wind from the swing almost knocked him down, but he held his balance. The princess covered her mouth with her hand, trying to stay calm. She wanted to scream, but she knew she could not interfere. The queen kept her eyes fixed on the fight. Her sharp gaze missed nothing. Rin ran around the beast in wide circles. The creature followed, trying to catch him. He stayed light on his feet, using his smaller size to his advantage. The crowd started to notice that he was not just running without aim. He was guiding the beast to the broken part of the ground. One more wrong step could make it fall. The beast attacked again. This time, Rin jumped sideways and struck its leg with the spear. The stone cracked slightly. The creature growled, turning even more aggressive. The beast lifted both arms and slammed the ground. A shockwave pushed Rin back. He rolled on the floor, dirt covering his clothes, but he held the spear tight. The crowd cheered. Some cheered for the beast. Some surprisingly cheered for the human. They had never seen someone fight like this. Varith warriors usually relied on power. Rin relied on speed and thought. The queen leaned forward a little in her seat. Her calm face showed the smallest hint of interest. The beast roared again and rushed forward. Rin ran straight toward it, which shocked the crowd. No one expected a human to charge at such a creature. At the last moment, he dropped low and slid under its body. As he slid, he struck the spear at the soft joint behind its leg. The stone cracked deeper this time. The beast stumbled. Its balance broke for a second. Rin rolled out and stood up quickly. He ran to the side, keeping his distance. The princess whispered softly under her breath, her hands shaking. She had always known Rin had courage, but seeing him face a monster that had defeated many trained warriors filled her heart with both fear and pride. She wanted him to win not just for her, but to show the whole empire that a human could stand as an equal. The beast stomped its feet again. The ground broke more. Rin felt the shock in his legs but stayed focused. He moved closer to the edge of the broken floor. He knew one more good strike could make it fall. The creature raised its arm and attacked with full force. Rin dodged to the side, then jumped forward with all his strength. He aimed for the glowing crystal in its chest, but the beast swung its other arm and hit him with the back of its hand. Rin flew backward and rolled hard on the ground. Pain shot through his body, but he forced himself to stand. The crowd held their breath. Everyone thought it was over. But Rin did not stop. He gritted his teeth, steadying his shaking legs. The beast moved toward him again. Rin lowered his body and tightened his grip on the spear. His heart was pounding fast. He remembered his training on Earth when he used to run through obstacle courses. He remembered how he learned to use every mistake as a chance. The creature attacked. He dodged left. He attacked its leg once more. This time, the stone broke fully. The creature stumbled and fell on one knee. The arena shook with the weight. Rin saw his chance. He ran forward with every bit of strength he had left. The spear in his hand glowed from the energy of the arena. The princess shouted his name, her voice loud and full of hope. The queen rose slowly from her seat. No one had ever seen her rise during a trial. Rin jumped into the air and landed on the creature's broken arm. He climbed up quickly, using cracks in the stone as steps. The beast tried to shake him off, but he held on tightly. He reached its chest. The glowing core pulsed like a heart. Rin raised the spear high above his head. The crowd went silent. He drove the spear straight into the glowing crystal. A bright light filled the arena. A deep cracking sound echoed all around. The beast roared one last time before its body shattered into thousands of glowing fragments. They floated up into the air like stars before fading away. Rin landed on the ground on one knee, breathing hard. His body ached, but he was alive. The arena was silent for a long moment. Then the silence broke with cheers that grew louder and louder. The people who once laughed at him were now standing. They cheered for the human who had defeated the stone beast faster than any. Warrior before him, the princess ran down the stairs to the arena floor. The guards did not stop her. Her steps were quick and light. She reached Rin and threw her arms around him. He was surprised, but too tired to speak. She looked at him with shining eyes. She whispered softly that she knew he would do it. Rin smiled faintly. He was not a warrior, but in this moment, he had proved something greater. High above them, the queen walked down from her seat with slow, measured steps. The nobles who had doubted Rin now bowed their heads in silence. The queen stood before Rin. Her gaze was deep and sharp. She had expected the human to fall. She had allowed this trial to teach the princess a lesson. But now, she was the one who had learned something new. The human had shown courage and skill beyond what she had believed possible. She extended her hand and placed it on his shoulder. This simple act sent a wave of shock through the crowd. It was the sign of true respect in Varith culture. The queen looked at the princess, then back at Rin. For the first time in many years, her lips curved into a small smile. She spoke in a clear voice that echoed through the arena. She said that the human had not only survived, but also achieved a victory that would be remembered for many years. The crowd roared again. Nobles who once whispered in doubt now lowered their heads in respect. Soldiers saluted. Children cheered. The princess stood tall beside Rin. In this moment, he was no longer just an outsider. He was a hero in the eyes of the Empire. He had broken their expectations and made them see humanity in a new light. The queen turned to her guards and gave an order. The great unity ceremony would be prepared. This was a rare and powerful event, where two worlds would form a strong bond. The princess looked at Rin with warmth. She had believed in him from the start, and now everyone had witnessed why. Rin looked at the cheering crowd, then at the glowing sky. He felt tired, but he also felt something new. He belonged here, not as a servant or outsider, but as someone who had earned his place. The arena that once felt cold and dangerous now felt alive and bright. The beast that had once filled the ground with fear was gone. The human, who many thought was weak, had changed everything. The queen turned back toward her seat, but her steps were slower now. She was thinking deeply. Her heart had been cold for many years, but this moment had touched something inside her. The human had not only won a battle, but also opened a door she never thought she would open. Aaron stood quietly at the center of the arena as the crowd chanted his name. The princess held his hand. He looked up at the royal box where the queen had stood. He knew this was only the beginning of something greater. The arena was quiet now. Stone Beast was gone, and only the glowing dust from its body floated slowly in the air. The sunlight broke through the tall towers and shined on Rin as if the sky itself had chosen him. The crowd that had filled the seat stood in silence, still trying to understand what they had just seen. Then a single voice shouted his name, and soon the whole arena followed. Thousands of voices rose together. They chanted the name of a human who had defeated what many thought was impossible, and stood in the center of the trial ground, breathing deeply. His body ached, but his heart was full of strength. The princess stood beside him, her eyes shining brighter than the glowing towers. She held his hand, and her smile showed pride and trust. She had believed in him when no one else had. She had seen something in him that even he had not fully seen in himself. Now the entire empire saw it too. The queen walked slowly down the steps from the royal box. Her presence made the crowd fall silent again. Every noble lowered their head as she passed. Her long robe moved gently with the wind. Her golden crown reflected the sunlight. Rin stood tall, even as his legs felt heavy. He looked at the queen, knowing this moment would decide not only his fate, but the future of two worlds. She stopped in front of him and looked into his eyes. Her gaze was calm, but strong. She had ruled for many years and had seen countless trials, but this one was different. The human who stood before her had done something no warrior of her own people had ever done. This was not just a gesture of respect. It was a declaration in front of everyone. She accepted him. The crowd erupted again. The nobles who once whispered against him now bowed their heads lower. Soldiers saluted. Children raised their hands in joy. Rin felt something powerful in the air. It was not fear, it was respect. The queen turned to the princess. Her voice was strong and steady. She announced that the great unity ceremony would take place at sunset. This would be the first bond between the Varith Empire and the people of Earth. It would change everything. The princess smiled wide. Rin felt his chest tighten with emotion. He had never imagined that his journey as a simple supply worker would bring him to this moment. Guards led Rin and the princess out of the arena through the grand hallway. People filled the streets outside. They cheered as the two walked past. Some threw petals made of light flowers. Others held glowing crystals to honor the victory. Rin looked at the faces of the Vareth people. Many had doubted him at the start. Now their eyes were full of admiration. The princess walked beside him, holding his hand gently. She whispered that the Empire would remember this day for centuries. Inside the palace, servants prepared for the great unity. The grand hall was decorated with flowing banners that shimmered like stars. Golden lights hung from the ceiling. A large circle of shining stones was placed at the center of the hall. This was where the bond would be made. The princess wore a royal robe with silver and gold lines. She also wore a crown of glowing crystal flowers, a symbol of peace. Rin was given formal clothes of the Vareth Empire. They were light and smooth with a soft blue glow along the edges. He looked at himself in the mirror and hardly recognized the man staring back. He had been a worker on a ship, but now he was standing at the heart of an empire. The queen entered the hall with her royal guards. Her steps were silent, but everyone felt her presence. She took her seat on the high throne that overlooked the stone circle. Nobles filled the seats around the edges of the hall. Soldiers stood tall in their armor. The sound of soft music filled the air. The great unity was not only a ceremony, it was a bond between two worlds. It was rare and sacred. When two people stood in the circle, they represented more than themselves. They represented their entire races. As the sun began to set outside, the hall filled with a soft golden light. Rin and the princess stepped into the circle. The crowd grew quiet. The queen rose from her throne and walked forward. She held in her hand the royal crystal, a glowing stone that carried the history of her people. She raised it high so everyone could see. Her voice carried across the hall. She spoke of strength and courage. She spoke of how her people had once believed they were unmatched. But today they had learned that courage was not owned by one race. It could be found anywhere, even in a single human who stood against a great beast and did not run. The crowd listened in silence. Some nodded. Some looked at Rin with respect. The queen turned toward him. She said that Rin had earned a place of honor, not through blood but through courage. She placed the crystal between him and the princess. It floated in the air, glowing brighter with each passing second. The princess stepped forward and placed her hand over the crystal. Rin followed, placing his hand beside hers. The crystal responded to their touch. A warm light spread through the hall, wrapping around everyone like a calm wave. The great unity bond was made through the light of the crystal. It connected their hearts and their worlds. When the glow faded, the queen placed her hand over their joined hands. She spoke clearly so the entire hall could hear. She declared that from this day forward, Earth and the Vareth Empire would walk the path of friendship and respect. The crowd rose from their seats. The hall filled with cheers once again. Bells rang from the towers outside. The night sky above the palace shined with bright stars. The princess looked at Rin with soft eyes. She whispered that he had changed everything. Rin felt a rush of emotion. He thought of his old life on the ship, the quiet nights in the cargo bay, the simple dreams he once had. Now he stood in a palace on another world, holding the hand of a princess and standing before a queen who had once doubted him. His heart was full. He knew this moment was bigger than him. After the ceremony, the celebration began. The palace opened its gates to the people. Light ribbons floated in the air. Musicians played soft tunes. Food and drink flowed through the hall. Rin walked among the people with the princess beside him. Children ran to him and asked to touch the glowing mark on his wrist, the mark given by the Unity Crystal. It symbolized the bond he had created. He laughed gently and let them touch it. The nobles came forward one by one, bowing their heads and offering words of respect. Many admitted they had misjudged him. They now saw him as a hero. The queen stood on the balcony above the hall, watching the celebration. For many years she had ruled with strength, but also distance. Her heart had grown cold because of many wars and many betrayals. But now she saw something different. A human had walked into her empire and changed it without war or force. He had done it with courage, with heart, and with trust. She felt something she had not felt in a long time. Hope.Rin stepped out onto the balcony. He saw the sky full of stars. He heard the music and laughter below. The princess joined him, resting her hand on the balcony rail. She told him that this night would be written in the royal history books. She said that one day, children would learn about the human who stood against the stone beast and brought two worlds together. Rin smiled softly. He had never thought of himself as someone special. Maybe this was what made the moment real. He was just a human who chose to be brave. The queen joined them on the balcony. Her face was calm, but her eyes were softer than before. She told Rin that he had earned not only their respect but also their trust. She said the future between their people would not be easy, but with courage like his, it could be built strong. She then did something no one expected. She gave him a royal insignia, a small golden emblem that only the most trusted were allowed to wear. It was a sign that he was no longer just a guest. It was part of their great story. The princess stood proudly beside him as the queen returned inside. The stars above seemed to shine brighter than ever. Rin held the emblem in his hand. He thought of his family back on Earth. He thought of how this news would travel across space. It would not just be his story. It would be the story of how humans proved themselves in a distant empire. The celebration continued late into the night. People danced in the palace gardens. Lights floated like fireflies. The sound of drums echoed through the city. Rin and the princess walked through the garden paths, talking about the future. She told him about her dreams for peace between their worlds. He listened carefully. He did not know what the future would hold, but he knew he wanted to help build it. As the night grew quiet, Rin looked up at the stars again. He remembered the fear he had felt when the beast first walked into the arena. He remembered the doubt in the eyes of the nobles. Remembered how the princess looked at him with trust. He remembered the queen's cold stare. Now everything had changed. He had not just won a trial, he had changed how an entire empire saw his kind. The princess squeezed his hand gently. She told him that the journey ahead would not be easy, but he had already done what many thought was impossible. He nodded. He knew that challenges would come, but he also knew he was not alone. But he had the princess, the trust of the queen, and the respect of the people. The bells rang again in the distance, marking the end of the celebration. The queen's voice echoed through the hall one last time that night. She declared the beginning of a new chapter between their worlds. People cheered again. Rin stood at the balcony once.